The Devil Wears Beige Knits and a Designer Hanky. A story about what happens when unhealed people are given power and 5-year-olds pay the price. When I found out she had laid hands on my then 5-year-old, dragging him and screaming at him while drowning out his tiny pleas to not be hurt, you could not have gifted me enough confessional sessions to absolve me of the sheer hate I felt towards that pitiful excuse of a Christian leading the school. And by God, if she wasn't the devil incarnate, then I clearly don't know Satan, a holy Ms. Trunchbull of sorts. But my son was no Matilda, a faith-based school for heaven's sake. But this principal was feral. She wore beige knits and a tight cardigan full of rage. Her elongated, skeletal fingers latched onto his arm as she flung him brutally across the front office floor with a force comparable to the Holy Spirit. Well, almost. She wasn't divine, though, and her presence held the warmth of an unblessed communion wafer. The school my offspring attended during this particular time in our lives seemed to have a mission statement resembling crucifix on the wall. Compassion out the window because the woman in charge was a nightmare, dressed up as religious virtue, and she played her part well. My boy had not yet been diagnosed ADHD. He was neurodivergent and struggling to regulate his developing mind as well as settle into kindergarten. And the early learning education system responsible didn't see a child doing his best. They just saw a problem. My girl jumped in the car, and just moments after the door thudded behind her, she turns to me horrified and says, "Mum, she was dragging him. He was crying, Mum. His arm was all red." "What?" I exclaimed. "Yeah, Mum. She just dragged him across the front office yelling at him, 'You're not being a good boy. You need to come with me. Stop that. Stop that.'" On this day, I was reminded of something I had forgotten. The universe has a funny way of showing us the truth. It's not always a dramatic come to Jesus moment or almighty reckoning. Sometimes it's as simple as an early school pickup to fit in last-minute medical appointments, placing the innocent eyes of a babe in the right place at the wrong time. I felt the air leave my lungs. I sat there looking at my girl, who remained devastated at what she just witnessed occur to her brother. With trembling fingers, I dial the school. The receptionist brushes me off and hangs up. She was never happy or kind. Even the most basic politeness always seemed a bit too much for her. I had never held it against her until then. I call back and demand to speak to the principal. She says nothing and forwards the call. The principal picks up and assumes she's still talking to the delight at reception because clearly no introduction was given, and says, "She's probably calling to complain about the kid. It's fine, I'll get her off quickly." Dead. Silence. I take a deep breath. "It's me," I say. "Cristina!" And just like that, the apology tour kicked in fast, over the top, and rehearsed with the precision of a Swiftie concert. The baptism of the eyeballs was on cue too. Her tear-infused manipulation reeked of insincerity, fear, guilt, and lacked any traces of remorse. She went on, not even coming up for air once to allow me an in to respond. She continued and begged me not to make a complaint. "Please, I'll lose my job," she repeated. But her wet cheeks were fainter than any miraculous saintly apparition I had ever heard of, and the truth was pretty clear. People don't often get front row seats at the Angry Cristina show because loud, angry Cristina still has a harsher bark than bite. It's quiet, angry Cristina that sets in fear to rival an invitation into the sewers from the Red Clown himself. I warn just above a whisper about laying a finger on my son again. A vengeful person I'm not, but like most mamas, if you mess with my children, hell hath no fury for the version of Jean Grey I can become. Blinded by my rage, I recall an incident from just weeks earlier when a fellow classmate punched my daughter square in the face for no significant reason. And the punishment the very same principal bestowed upon him was a fitting 5 minutes of missed PE class. And why? Because he cried and she had felt sorry for him. never mind the no violence policy or the fact that boys need to be taught young that violence against women is not the way to deal with your dysregulated emotions, or the fact that the entire Christian faith is underpinned by the loving teachings of Christ, a man so pure of heart he didn't even hate on those that nailed him to the cross. But with my son, she was able to make an exception to the rules and the standard. She didn't even uphold herself as she dragged my little boy across the office with no compassion, mercy, or care. I was left wondering how the principal so easily triggered into rage could be trusted to shepherd a flock. Later that night, as I sat in the quiet ache of sadness, sad for him, sad for me, for being failed, again by the very systems meant to protect us, my sadness turned to anger at myself. Far out, I knew it was only going to be a matter of time before the lesson appeared dressed up in holy camouflage, looking something like the reenacting of a scene plucked out straight from Easter. The lesson pierced my heart with the awareness kicking in almost immediately, and I was transported back to the memory of when I enrolled the kids in the very first place. I had betrayed myself and my better judgment despite my gut warning me plenty to not take my kids to that school. In that moment, I had felt it, the apprehension, the feeling of not quite right, even though my head and those around me adamantly insisting it was the right thing to do. Because the only reason my kids were at that school was pressure from the opinions of extended family who had ingrained beliefs about a Catholic education at any cost. And the irony of it all, I had been the one meeting that cost as I ended up having to clean another extended family member's house just to afford the school fees, dragging my body through undiagnosed debilitating pain, which felt like climbing Everest in thongs, while I was also rebuilding from rubble after a rather ugly breakup and solo parenting. Still, I made it work. I forced it to. I abandoned any remaining intuition at the time that yelled at me, trying to protect me and the kids. What stung the most was realizing I'd bent over backwards for someone else's idea of what was right for me. I bent, broke, and pushed through for appearances, for peace disguised as avoidance, and all for anyone else but me. But here was the inescapable truth. I had given away my power to people who shouldn't even be driving, so why was I surprised when they crashed me straight into the parish bulletin under cautionary tales? I couldn't blame anyone else. It was on me for willingly handing over the keys to those underqualified to even ride a tricycle. The school's response was equally underwhelming, disappointing, and quieter than a nuns group chat. There was no investigation. There was no follow-up. There was no accountability. Just a final invoice and the expectation to pay before term end. The school and its leader mirrored something deeper in me, a part of me that had still been stuck in survival and had remained handing over the wheel to unauthorized players in my own game. My gut had warned me, but I let others steer. Seeing clearly, it appeared that her refusal to hold a violent boy accountable wasn't about policy, it was about her. Just like her rage at my son wasn't about discipline, it was about her wounds, her unresolved pain. Because when people in power haven't healed, they don't lead. They project and wreak havoc for anyone in their path, punishing the innocent and hurting the vulnerable while continuing to hide behind whatever mask they wish to present to the world. This lesson taught me that just as misery loves company, so does joy, happiness, honesty, integrity, and kindness. It taught me to pick my vibe wisely, the places, the people, the products, and keep in alignment regardless of external opinions. It taught me that no matter the consequence may be, I don't ignore my inner compass and to choose peace, integrity, and happiness every time. So, to all those still cloaked in knitwear, clutching their rosaries of control, may your righteousness be real, your heart soft, and your cardigans less cruel. And may peace be with you.